April 18, 1942, 80 young American airmen are about to embark on their first combat mission. It might also be their last. The planes they are flying were never intended to launch from an aircraft carrier, but that's what they were about to do. They have enough fuel to reach their targets, military and industrial sites in Tokyo and 5 other Japanese cities, but not much farther. And even if they somehow make their way to China and relative safety, no one knows they're coming. Decades later, the children of those aviators visited China to quite literally walk in their father's footsteps. But is this mission remembered in China as heroic or misguided? What kind of reception will they receive at a time when America-China relations are bad, very bad? One historical event, 2 different stories. What really happened? The Pacific Ocean, vast and beautiful, seemingly endless. In 1941, millions of Americans hoped this vastness would protect them from a war that had been raging in Asia for more than 10 years. They were wrong. A year earlier, David Thatcher, a farm boy from Montana, decided his future was in the U.S. Army Air Corps.
When he was a young child, he saw an airplane flying overhead on that dryland farm. And from that point on, my dad was just hooked on the concept of flight, and he always wanted to fly. And so the Army Air Corps was just a logical extension of that.
Like many other children growing up in Depression-era Chicago, Charles Ozick was the son of immigrants. He joined the Army Air Corps for very practical reasons.
I think there are 2 intersecting reasons why he joined the Air Force. One was because he had just gone through the Depression. His family had 6 children. He was very determined to help his mother. So joining the Air Force would give him 3 square meals a day, and he could send money home to his mother. And I think also that people knew that the war was out there on the horizon, so he wanted to be prepared for that.
An unprepared America was going to war. 80 young airmen would be asked to change that narrative. The challenge is to see past old black and white images to discover the individuals who actually lived these stories. Who better to tell them than their children? Along with the children and grandchildren of the total strangers who rescued them. Ordinary people who didn't see themselves as heroes.
No, my father never would say, he would never call himself a hero. He thought that the Americans, the pilots who he helped, those were the heroes. He just thought of himself as just an ordinary person who did what any Chinese men would do in the same situation.
Starting in 1931, Japan began occupying an ever-growing portion of China. By mid-1941, 7 million Chinese had already died. China's leader was Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek. Chinese students rallied to urge him to fight against those who had invaded their homeland. One of them was named Tung Shun Lu.
There were student delegations that got together to try to meet with Chiang Kai-shek or members of the government to persuade him to prosecute the war more energetically. And apparently my father was the leader of one of these student delegations, and he met with Chiang Kai-shek and some of his aides at one point and presented a sword to them and tried to ask them to do more to fight the Japanese.
American President Franklin Roosevelt presided over nothing but defeat in the months following Pearl Harbor. Defeat and humiliation. Like at a bleak Pacific outpost called Wake Island.
Cunningham speaking. I have a message for the President of the United States. In the face of superiority, we are obliged to give up Wake Island. Since our capture, we have been well treated, and I wish to thank the people of the Japanese nation for their consideration.